the All-Gazette basketball edition of our videos here. I'm sports editor Gabe Lissnett, joined by sports writers Philip Gardner, Richard Walker. Similar to what we did during football season, we're going to run down the list of who made the All-Gazette basketball first and second teams. Obviously, the names that we mentioned will be the only people honored. We also have an honorable mention list, which you'll also be able to see that as well. I'll run through the girls first of all and have these guys kind of break down the boys and girls team. Starting with the girls' first team, Justin Taylor from Ashbrook, Shannon Smith and Kelsey Harris from FORESTVIEW, Lindsay Wright from East Lincoln, Lulu Braze from Gaston Day. Girls Player of the Year, Shannon Smith from FORESTVIEW, and Girls Coach of the Year, Ken Beatty from FORESTVIEW. Phil, break down the girls team.
Well, no debate over Shannon Smith Player of the Year. She really carried this team all year. A very talented team, but she was definitely the best player, the leading scorer in the area, the leading assist girl in the area, 26.3 points per game, 6.6 assists per game. She really stepped it up in the playoffs, 40 against Hickory in the sectional finals. She ended up with 31 in the state championship game. A little debate here, and good news for FORESTVIEW, she'll be back for another year. We thought Kelsey Harris was also a lock for that first team, the two girls who really drove that team. I thought Lindsay Wright from East Lincoln was also a lock. She's going to go to Wake Forest after another year at East Lincoln. Lulu Braze, I thought, was another solid selection, and Justin Taylor from Ashbrook. We've got to reward Ashbrook for having one of their best seasons in some time. And then Coach of the Year, I mean, with Coach Beatty, what he did with this team, obviously they expected to get in the state championship game, but to actually get there, we've got to reward him for doing the job that he did this year.
Switching it over to the boys, first team for the boys, Preston Holmes from FORESTVIEW, Terry Wisnett from Cherryville, Keith Rendleman from East Lincoln, Corey Rayleigh Ross and Teron Sheffy from Gaston Day. Boys Player of the Year, Keith Rendleman from East Lincoln. Boys Coach of the Year, Dan Ghent from FORESTVIEW. Richard, talk about the boys team a little bit.
Actually had very challenging selections this year because of how good our boys teams played this season. Certainly Keith Rendleman, our Player of the Year in football as well, one of them. And what a great year for East Lincoln. Lost some guards from a year ago. Had a football team that was so successful that, they got a little bit of a late start. A player that was on our second team, Spencer Sidney, added to the team in January. Rendleman, to me, just stood out as the best all-around player. And, one of those players that probably, if you knocked him for anything, it'd be he wasn't selfish enough at times, because he did seem to defer and allow other teammates to get involved and score, because his average is 21 points a game. And, I could argue that on some teams you could see him scoring 30 points a game if he wanted to. I mean, of course, they played more of a defensive-oriented style. I mean, those people that watched a lot of these Lincoln games, I mean, their defense was terrific. They held some teams in the 20s during the year. And then the rest of the first team, Corey Rayleigh Ross and Teron Sheffy, terrific players for another solid team at Gaston Day. Terry Wisnett, who we've talked about in football season as well, one of the best young athletes we've had come along in several years around here, only a sophomore. I was at the game when they were really one play basically away from going to the state finals and 1A, lose to Bishop McGinnis, who ended up winning the state championship. And then perhaps the most difficult debate we had was with FORESTVIEW, and we kind of deferred to the way the coaches voted in the Big South Conference. Preston Holmes got Conference Player of the Year, but when you watch FORESTVIEW play this year, and Phil and I have talked about this a lot, they had 4, 5, 6, 7 players game to game that made big plays for them, in the regionals. Jack Sumner got regional MVP. We kind of felt like DeJuan Means probably deserved that honor a little more, but again, I mean, they were both really solid players. Holmes had a good year. Jarkevis Alexander had a great year. In the regionals, Calvin Smith had a career high from the post. I mean, they're just a really balanced team, and you kind of feel bad when you do an all-star team like this, because you do want to reward the best teams, and that team was truly a team, which kind of lends itself maybe not so much to individual honors, but we feel like Preston certainly deserving, and particularly when the coaches and the rival coaches in his conference feel like he was the Player of the Year. So, really one of the best first teams I think we've had around here in years, and an example of how strong our teams were this year. And you get 2 teams going to the Final 4 of the state, and Gaston Day, I believe, made it to the Final 8 of their state classification, and that's not even talking about a guy that we didn't even honor from Bremerton Christian, and I think they made it to their state finals game. So what a terrific year for boys basketball in this area this season.
Definitely was a banner year for boys and girls basketball in the county. Let me run through the second teams real quick. For boys, Rico Pagan from East Gaston, Octavius Robinson from North Gaston, Darius Howe from Cherryville, Spencer Sidney from East Lincoln, and DeJuan Means from Forestview. Second team for the girls, Janae Bricky from Ashbrook, Haley Black from East Gaston, Ashley Pratt from Forestview, Shantae Crawford from South Point, and Janara Sellers from Bessemer City. Obviously, look for this in print as well. We'll have that in a coming edition here in the next few days or so. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the spring.